What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from BackTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. And we did it. We did it. My bitching went somewhere. If you just complain loud enough and long enough and just keep treating somebody like crap, it'll get somewhere. Emilia Perez has English audio description. It happened. They have put English audio description. It is now accessible, and that means all 10 Best Picture nominees have audio description. I haven't reviewed I'm Still Here. I've seen it. Sony Pictures Classics gave that to me without audio description, but then in its theatrical release, I see it does have audio description, which is, I've held off because I would much rather just wait for the audio description for that. So I've sort of seen I'm Still Here. I will one day watch that with audio description. It's currently in very limited release. Anyway, would have been nice to get the audio description with the screener Sony Pictures Classics. Just saying, you maybe think about it next time. Anyway, back to Emilia Perez. Yes. Thanks. Shout out to International Digital Center, which did the audio description on this. This is written by Liz Gutman. It has 5 different AD narrators doing voice work here. I believe it was 5. I think I counted 5 names. They're all at the end, and they do that thing where each one of them speaks, so you can match the name to the voice. I saw that Zone of Interest did that last year, and that was really cool because they had a multitude of audio description talent. It's not dubbed. It's done by the audio description narrators, and the difference there is important. And we'll talk about that because I've loosely talked about this movie before, and I've talked about it throughout like awards predictions. I should talk about the movie a little bit now that I've had more fully formed opinion on it. I'm also a member of Gallica, and the opinions in Gallica are all over the map for this movie. I think a lot of people think that the people who are putting backlash on Emilia Perez are people who are anti-trans, and that by voting for Emilia Perez, they're standing with the trans community. No, the calls are coming from inside the house as well. Now, to be fair, it's not all of them. I know people who are LGBT and trans, specific, who like this movie. So is it the best representation possible? No, because if it was, everybody would like it for its representation. So the easy answer there is no. Like, I don't have to think about that one too hard, because if it was the best trans representation, then there wouldn't be transgender people who they would be able to debate the quality of the movie, not the level of the representation in it. So, and how they're represented. That would not be a factor. So it can't possibly be the best representation if that community is having to debate whether or not it is viable representation for the community. So, not being transgender myself, I can't speak to specifically why it would or would not bother me in that light. The problems that I see are that it seems as though to suggest that Emilia is making a transition to start a new life, more so than they don't make enough of an effort to make it feel like this is what I want. There's a question that she's asked about, do you want a new life or a new gender? And she said, what's the difference? And it's like, well, there is a difference. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people, when they transition and they keep the people around them, and the people around them know that they have transitioned. Like, I've had plenty of people who have transitioned around me, and sure, you lose people who are stuck in the mud or whatever with their heads in the mud, but they still have some people around them, like they still have some friends and maybe some family or whatever, but they don't literally just pretend that their old self died and go pretend to be somebody else. So I think that's probably, if I had to pinpoint the problem one of the biggest problems, I should say. That would be it. That's what I catch kind of at the beginning of this. But I can't stop being happy that there's a transgender actress that was nominated for an Academy Award with Carla Sofia Gascon. So, if nothing else, it's sort of the same argument that I make about Gone with the Wind. Is it's like you can say all you want about that movie, but please don't take that away from her. You know, like that's the first um, black actress to win an Academy Award is from Gone with the Wind. Is it the best representation? Absolutely fucking not. No. But that is still a historical moment, and nothing should be taken away from her. So, like, I don't want to take anything away from Carla Sofia Gascon here either, because, like, sometimes you have to be the first. You have to take that first step so that somebody else can do it later and better or more profound or win. It's like, that's just how it is, you know? I mean, Halle Berry is the first African American actress to win. She's not the first one to be nominated in lead actress. So, you have to start somewhere. And I, the music, it's interesting because I did watch this one time through. I have a review existing on my channel of me having watched this as it was presented to me with no English, just with the Spanish audio description, and the little bit of, or did I watch it with Spanish? Did I watch it with Spanish audio description or did I just watch Spanish? I can't remember now. Anyway, with my little bit of Duolingo Spanish, and I think my score's like a 30. So I got some words, you know, and it's always exciting as a as a white English speaking man. I was really excited. I was like, oh my God, I know what that word means. So that's where I'm at with my Spanish. Couldn't understand full conversations, but I'd pick out words and I'd be like, oh, I got that. Oh, yeah, cool, I know that word. So that was my experience originally with Emilia Perez. But I've heard the music as written, because when you do the audio description, you end up translating the audio. The songs are in English. We've done that, which I thought about that. And I was like, okay, so we don't always translate music. Like plenty of people know Bésame Mucho, you know, or Despacito, Macarena. You know what I'm saying? I hate to use those songs as examples, but we sing them here in America as is. But I don't know, the thing is that the way that this musical's written is that the songs kind of continue to tell the story. This really is sort of like a musical in that the reason why none of the songs are necessarily memorable, it's so weird that Sing keeps winning Best Original Song, by the way, is that they just kind of keep, like, they're doing their thing and they just kind of start singing. So they'll be talking about this and they'll just kind of start singing and picking up their pitch, and then they're doing it and singing and talking a pitch, and they're going, and like, that's kind of how the vibe is. There are a couple more musical numbers, but some of that music is literally just very conversational. So, and important to know what it is that they're saying if you're trying to understand the context of the film. So I think we do have to have it translated. It's interesting because it's only that way because the whole thing, well, this movie's 95% in Spanish. There is a scene that was in English because I saw this film without any English dub or audio description to it. So I know there's a scene that is actually in English. It's not like in the Heights where it's sort of Spanglish, where it's a mix. And then you have songs like Paciencia y Fe, which it's like a Spanish title, but it's English lyrics, or like she's singing English, but the title. So I guess somebody would have to look up what Paciencia y Fe means if they didn't know. It means patience and faith. So there's that. Uh, so once you get past that, um, also another thing I want to say before I dive fully into the audio description here is while I am exceptionally happy with Netflix for doing this, let's be honest, they bought this at Cannes in May. So if they bought this at Cannes in May and knew from that moment that they had to develop audio description for it, that would have given them plenty of time to develop an audio description track or a dub track or whatever, multiple languages by the time they released this thing at the end of October, early November. I think because it has it had a theatrical release in late October and then dropped on streaming early in November. So you'd want it to have audio description for theatrical as well for the limited run. And that's plenty of time. You know what I'm saying? Instead of waiting and seeing like testing the waters. And like, we have all of these other like random Netflix movies that they just keep throwing audio description on all the time that nobody really knows what they are or care about. But yet they bought this at Cannes after it won a jury prize for the cast, and they didn't think there was going to be enough hype behind it. It's very odd. And I'm very surprised they did this because they did not do this with El Conde, which was nominated last year for an Academy Award in cinematography. They did not do this the previous year for Bardot, which was also nominated for cinematography. And both of those have auteur directors behind them who English audiences would have been interested in watching, like in Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu film, the guy that directed Birdman and The Revenant, who directed Bardot. And then also, they didn't do it for Roma, which was nominated for like 10 or 11 Academy Awards. That never got audio description. I really expected them to just never do it with Emilia Perez. There seems to be like some sort of trend where the Oscar bait films from south of the border are just not getting audio description. So I'm surprised they did it, but I know that they did it late. I know that they waited until this movie hit and until it had enough awards buzz, which means this track was produced super fast. So a lot of the questions that I have and a lot of the thoughts I have were made. I don't think they greenlit audio description until after this dropped. I don't think that was a thing. I think they dropped this film and they got some backlash, and then somewhere in November, maybe they ordered it and it got here by January. I think at best, that's where it is. And I don't even know if November is the answer. They could have called somebody, they could have called the Better National Digital Center in December and been like, yeah, we just got some Golden Globe noms. We've decided to put audio description on Emilia Perez. We'd love to get this out as, in 30 days or something, like as quickly as possible. You have this amount of time to do it. Can you do it? And then International Division was like, fuck, yeah? So they just like, they just hit the ground running and just, I guess we're doing it. And so I have a lot of questions and thoughts that I've had from other things, but this one I think I would give it so much grace for existing at this point because, yeah, I don't think this has any reflection. I think the fact that it's as good as it is from International Digital Center is amazing because I think it was made with very little turnover time to get this out there because let's be honest, like I said, they picked this thing up in May. That is plenty of time to make an audio description track. If you go, we've picked this film up, it's not in English, we want our American audiences and our American blind and low vision audiences to have an equal experience with this by the time it drops in October, I think that is a reasonable amount of time for audio description. I think they would have been able to produce this like the same level of track that that I heard sort of for Matilda, which does feature a little bit more singing because it is actually a dub cast and not audio description narrators who had to jump in. So there's a little bit of a difference between what we got for Emilia Perez and what they gave to the other language dubs, international dubs for Matilda the musical, sort of comparatively. where the cast does sing. Here, it's spoken. So what I would then draw a conclusion, not a conclusion, but more of a thought too, is this is more like, reminds me of Shogun, which was a show that I was able to critique a little bit more in terms of, it was hard for me to critique fully the performances, but I was able to enjoy and understand that show a little bit more on a different level than I was something like Squid Game, because with Squid Game as a show, that's a complete dub cast that we listen to. So it's really hard for me to say which actors and performers are doing an exceptional work because I'm listening to the dub cast and I don't actually know who the dub cast is. But with the way that they chose to do Shogun as an international thing that most people are familiar with, I kind of disagree with it because it was one dude doing everything, which was weird. But it was balanced in a way where you could hear the original intent of the actors. So it was done as audio description because it was just one guy who was doing the description part, but also the subtitle translation. And Emilia Perez, it has shades of that. So what they've tried to do in the background is you can hear the original performers. You can hear the music behind it. I think it's balanced a little bit too high for what they're trying to achieve. For me, I would have balanced it back a little bit and made it. I mean, yes, we came for the audio description, but I also appreciate what you're trying to do here with the overlay. And I think if you're trying to keep and maintain that music so that way it's not just audio description, like obliterating everything, I would have dialed it back just a little bit in the mix, personally. But that's also I mean, that could be a file transfer thing. That could be maybe they transferred it at something and then Netflix put it up as something else. So I don't even know if that's a thing. I mean, I'm pretty certain that for example, I've been complaining on my site about Saturday Night Live. I'm pretty certain that the live audio description doesn't scream at people, but it does on Peacock. So I think that's a porting problem. And Peacock just doesn't care. It's just whatever. So yeah, that's a thought. That's one of the thoughts that I have. I will in other things that I've mentioned when I've done reviews for shows before, I'm always a little bit worried about whitewashing casts. I know it's something that we can't avoid, and it's happening. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we're losing the cultural impact of a show by just going out and finding like what sounds like the cast of the Real Housewives of wherever, you know. I really found this with like Women in Blue, which took place in Mexico, and that cast sounds like the whitest cast I've ever heard. They may not all be white, but the people who are not are trying really hard to give like sort of a Malibu Barbie sound to that show. And as much as I liked Women in Blue, I was like, what are we doing with the cast? So here nobody really sounds Spanish. Okay. And I think about representation in terms of who is voicing Emilia. And I hate saying things like sounds trans because that could be offensive to somebody, but I think that's what they went for here. So I think they tried to find accurate representation. The interesting thing, though, is that the trans woman who is voicing Emilia is not pitched at the same level as Emilia. It's a much lower voice than Emilia Perez's voice in the thing. And you can kind of hear that, the transition up. But then again, I think they had about like 2 weeks to do this. So I think the fact that they were able to find any sort of representation in that period of time that was accurate for the part, and they didn't just go with a complete, obliteration of the LGBT-ness of her character. Um, Kudos. I really do think that they made this on the fly. I think this was shoved upon them with the tightest timeline possible. So I don't think there was much of a casting call. I think they called up, this was sort of like, well, who do you know? Well, we know so and so. Good, bring them in. you know? Um, so it's a thought that I have for like as a broad thing that I'm just making a comment on, but I think all in all, this is a fucking great track. Um, I because I wasn't expecting this, and I bitched at Netflix for not having it. And at the time, because I'm a critic and I'm able to talk to reps and stuff, I did ask. You know what I'm saying? Like, I asked the reps for this that were campaigning the awards thing to check to see if there was an English audio description track or was going to be, and my answer was no. So at the time of release, the answer was no. So either they were lied to or lying to me. But at the time of release, there was no English audio description track, and nor were there plans that they were aware of to have one. So the fact that there is one means Netflix made this choice after the release of the movie on the streaming, which gives a very narrow window because that was about 2 months ago. So, and I don't think that they dropped that movie day and date and then picked up the phone. Whoops. We forgot. So, the depth of description is exceptional in the beginning. Zoe Saldana's character is so well described in all of her movement and her clothing, the way that she looks and her skin tone. They have so much at the beginning of this film to support her. She's almost unfairly described better than the others because the scenes just allow for it. So you get to really know what Zoe Saldana looks like, even more so than the other three female leads, Carla Sofia Gascon, Selena Gomez, and Adriana Paz, who hasn't been getting a lot of awards consideration, but I like her role in this, and it's just smaller. But then again, I kind of understand why Selena Gomez isn't getting. The problem is that technically Zoe is a co-lead, but we don't do co-leads anymore because nobody actually thinks that two people will ever get nominated for lead. So you get stuff like A Real Pain, where Kieran Culkin is definitely a co-lead with Jesse Eisenberg, but he gets nominated in supporting. Just like Zoe has a ton of screen time. Actually, arguably, the supporting actress race that currently exists is Zoe, Ariana, and then three people who have significantly less time in their films. So you could easily define Zoe and Ariana as co-leads in their movies. But I mean, Wicked is very much about the structure between Elphaba and Glinda, and as friends, and the fact that they've chosen to name the sequel Wicked for Good actually highlights how important Glinda is to Wicked. So, and she's in a ton of that movie. She's all over that. So is Zoe. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things a little bit like The Favorite too, where somebody actually did the timing of who was actually on screen the most, and it wasn't Olivia Colman. It was actually Emma Stone, but Olivia Colman was submitted to because of how the perception of the film was. I wouldn't be surprised to hear if Zoe actually has more screen time. So the fact that we know the most about her really is not that big of a problem. But I thought, considering that they have to work around musical numbers and dialogue, we got a pretty solid depth of description here. They're always attempting to bring as much richness to this world as possible in terms of what people look like, in terms of what they're wearing, and I really appreciated that. I think it's an excellent audio description track, even made more so by the fact that I think it was made in like 5 minutes. I think Liz Gutman took some 24-hour energy shots and just stayed up and wrote this script. And then they summoned the cast to voice, and they were like, you have 5 hours to get this. We have to get this done. I think the quality control If there was a step, I'm sure IDC, I'm sure they did at least a quality check. I'm sure they were like, who's available right now to do the QC? We have to get this out immediately. So, but you don't want to disappoint. You want to prove that you can get quality, but you don't want to degrade yourself either as a company. Like IDC doesn't want to put out something that is less than. So everybody just stepped up to the plate. Are there little things that, if given like longer time, that I would have had thoughts on? Absolutely. Like I said, I would have uh, I tried to find people who sounded vaguely Latino. Um, I might have pitched somebody higher in the register as Emilia post transition. So, yeah, I because she is not because of anything else, but because Emilia's actual voice, because Carla's voice is pitched higher. I would have tried to match it a little bit more. Anyway, lots of thoughts, but I'm just grateful that the fucking track is here, man. Like we get 10 Best Picture nominees now with audio description, and that's an excellent thing. That's a beautiful thing. 2 years in a row. It's something we shouldn't have to be grateful for. It's just something that we should have. Like, I'm very much pushing for audio description for everything, describe everything. Um, Accessibility matters. But in a day and age where we're killing DEI programs, it's going to be harder and harder for us to make this case. And more people are going to drop things like audio description because it's cool to do so. We've made it cool to say no to people like us. We've made it like that's the trend. Now fuck off, blind people. We don't need to meet your accessibility needs anymore. That's the national trend. We don't need you. Go die in a ditch. And that's going to be the mood for a while. So take the win, because I don't know what next year is going to look like in terms of audio description. Um, God knows. I'm worried for the companies that provide it. I'm hoping that they continue to provide it. I'm hoping that they continue to work with. We do still at least have some regulations, I believe, in terms of network television continuing to provide it. But and that's where it ends. It just doesn't really go much further beyond that. So they were never required to do this, but it's nice that they did. I think the best way to do it, I've always argued, the best way to get audio description is if you start with festivals and awards bodies and have accessibility requirements, everybody would have it. If AMPUS had an accessibility requirement for audio description and closed captioning and across the board, that it would become far more prominent, especially if they required it in English and not just an audio description track. For these international contenders coming from all of these random countries, most of them are being picked up by American distributors who have the money and ability to do so. Neon has the money to be able to put audio description on the Seed of the Sacred Fig. They're just not doing it. So, yeah. Netflix always had the money in the budget. If they have the money in the budget for an awards campaign, they have the money in the budget for accessibility. So, that's that. Anyway, now I can actually give a firm grade on Emilia Perez. How much did I like Emilia Perez? What are my final thoughts on Emilia Perez? Well, I cannot be personally offended quite the same way, but I don't want to disregard the fact that the people that are. So for the people in the LGBT community who see the representation as insufficient or irresponsible, I hear that and I see that side. But I've also had those same conversations from people who see it as being important, who are part of that community. So I'm sort of at edge, like between the two things, as being like, which one is it? But I definitely want to dispel the misconception that the calls are just coming from people who are the same people who are trying to stop the 5 transgender athletes who are in this country. Actually, it's like 43. You can actually check NCAA tracks. And I think it's like 40, there of the hundreds of thousands of high school and college athletes, I think 43 of them are listed as transgender. So we got to make sure there are too many of them at 43. Um, that's the meaningful legislation that we're passing. But because of attacks like that, because people think, I don't know, there's some sort of weird transgender athlete army out there, it's led to a groundswell of support for Emilia Perez, where there probably wouldn't normally be a groundswell of support. Plus, we also have this irrational fear of people coming from south of the border. Guess where this movie takes place? This cast is primarily Latinx. So it's almost like this movie has become an activist movie, and people are choosing it, regardless of whether or not it's their favorite movie of the year, as like to make a point. Cool. I'm not gonna stop you. Feel free. But also at the end of the day, we won't remember why movies were chosen 25, 30, 40 years from now. We'll just look back at that year as being like, how did How Green My Valley win? You know, how green was my valley? What? And I don't think this is it. I don't think this is the best picture of the year. It very well may be international, because there are so few things that are international films that between like the few that I've seen, I guess I would give it the edge. I would have previously tapped maybe Kneecap or Touch. Do I think Emilia Perez has a little bit more to it than that? Yeah, a little bit. I think there certainly is a clear auteur style to this from Jacques Audiard. So whereas Kneecap and Touch just feel like they're cool stories, there's definitely something happening here from a director that's trying to do something cinematic with the actual medium itself. So the performances are strong, from what I can tell, by being able to still hear them in the background and being able to assign them to the, now having seen the film twice. But it's hard, it's still hard for me to really fully wrap around any of these performances just because of how we access them, which is why I said I would have dipped back the balance a little bit, is so that we could understand these performers a little bit more. And their lovely singing voices. So yeah, and the singing, it's weird, but I understand what you're doing. And some people are gonna bristle at that, and I'm just like, listen, this is not an IDC problem. This is a Netflix thing. Like I said, if they had commissioned it back in May, we would have had singers. We wouldn't have had people who are going, and now we walk forward. Yeah, it's awkward. But what else are you gonna do, man? Like, these are audio description tracks, and when you're singing and you're talking, when you do it in musical form and you sing, and now we walk forward, sounds a lot nicer, because there's like a melody behind it. But when somebody just monotones it straight through, it's just, yeah. But I know why it was happening. It's happening because Netflix waited until the last minute to add audio description, but thank God at least they did. So it's kind of humorous because we wouldn't normally get that. Like, musicals are not really done that way. If you don't believe me, I encourage you to put on Matilda the musical and listen to any of the other dubs. To prove a point, when I reviewed Emilia Perez, I listened to a little bit of the Spanish audio description dub of Matilda, and it's singing. They found a dub cast that could sing. So it's all timing, and all of that wraps up into, is Emilia Perez in my top for the year? No. But then again, I don't really have an international film in my top this year. This is just not a year that the right film blew me away. I don't have Kneecap or Touch in my top either. So, and one of those two films would have been what I would have said previously was my favorite international film of the year. So, yeah, because of that, this is just kind of, it's about the same level for me as them. I think it's fun, and when I listened to it the first time, I liked the music. I did not know the context of the music, but I thought the music was cool and it has its own vibe. All of that said, um, I I struggle with the representation. I do, because I've heard the argument both ways, and it's tough. And I see both sides. I see one side that is just happy to be represented, and I think about that from a blind person's perspective, though. And what I would say is, um, I constantly say that we, as a blind population, have to stop being okay with being offered the bare minimum and accepting the fact that that we deserve less. So, for the people who are excited about trans representation, I'm excited for Carla being in the race, that happened. I'm excited that there's a transgender actress in the race, that we got to a point where we could vote for that. As far as the movie in which she's from and the context and everything, and the choices of direction from Jacques Audiard, I don't know. So at the end of the day, I tend to lean away from this is great representation from Emilia Perez. Is it the worst representation this year? No, uh, it's not. There's some really bizarre representation in movies like Heather, which will make you go, I don't know about this. Um, and certainly I touched on some anniversary releases this year, like Ace Ventura, where you're like, well, what the fuck? So yeah, uh, we're not there yet. You know, we got there. I think probably pretty well. I would say when MJ Rodriguez got her Emmy nomination for Pose. This is not that. We're not there. We're not at that level. Or Laverne Cox for Orange is the New Black. This doesn't feel quite like that. But somebody had to be first so that somebody else could do it later. Laverne Cox had to be nominated so MJ Rodriguez could come through later. You know? Um, I'm going to give Emilia Perez a B+. I hesitate on giving it an A because I'm just not supportive of this representation. I don't like the message that it's sending, that you have to, that either he's doing it because he is trying to escape his past life and he's like, well, I guess I could live as a woman, or that in order to live, you have to completely kill your old life. It's an odd choice in terms of representation in that way, but that's it. Those are my long ass thoughts on Emilia Perez. Now that we have audio description, anyway. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Shout out to everybody who made an excellent track considering the time constraints. Jesus. And I will see you guys on the other side.